running for governor of Georgia. David, you have an interesting background. Can you share a little bit about what your professional background is and what motivated you to run for mayor of Dalton, a small North Georgia town?
I'm a third-generation independent insurance agent in Dalton, Georgia. I'm a small business person. My clients are all small business people. And Dalton's been a very successful community my entire lifetime. And goes back even further than that because we invented our own industry, the carpet industry. And we're the last manufacturing center left in Georgia, really. And when you look over the years, beginning probably about 10, 12 years ago, Dalton lost their way because the industry consolidated. We lost a lot of the entrepreneurial relationships that we had. When there were smaller businesses, they understood they needed to be involved in local government as much as the politicians were. When they got larger, they turned their backs really on Dalton as far as paying attention to what was going on in government. And by turning it over to professional politicians, we became one of the highest taxed cities in Georgia. Probably at one time before I was elected mayor, we were easily the third highest, if not the second highest in Georgia. And, you know, I'm not a professional politician. People that know me, sometimes I'm not the most politically correct person because I speak what's on my mind. And I felt it was time for someone with my personality attempted to find out if the voters would respond to me. It was the most competitive election in Dalton history, at least that I know of. 4 of us, you know, all 4 of us very well known. 3 of them, you know, not professional politicians, but have been involved in politics, Dalton politics for a long time. And the voters of Dalton decided they liked the politically incorrect business person versus the other 3.
But what made you want to run for that?
Because I care very deeply about Dalton, Georgia. As I said, I'm a third-generation independent insurance agent. I'm David E. Pennington III. My son, who's now in my business as of last year, is David E. Pennington IV. And he deserved to have the same opportunity in Dalton that I had, or as best that we could make it. And I felt like, you know, Dalton was really going the way that the state is gone and America is going. We've lost, you know, the spirit of what really made America great, and also what I really feel like all Americans' birthright is, which is to be the freest nation on earth.
What were the results of your campaign, and have you turned Dalton around?
First of all, no individual can turn the city around, the county around, the state or country around. You've got to be able to, you know, excite the rest or enough people to get that done. Because first of all, Dalton is what is called a weak mayor system. I only vote if there's a tie. And in 6 years, I've never had to vote. And really, I've only really had 1 negative vote from a council person on any of our mission or policy since then. And we've cut property taxes 6 consecutive years. We can't find another place in Georgia and probably America that's done that now by a total of almost 30%. We haven't had a countywide SPLOST in 6 years. We passed the first Freeport exemption in Dalton and Winfield County history and cut most business license fees in half. And in 2012, Dalton ranked 9th amongst all American cities in fastest growing incomes. That's
remarkable. Are your city council persons all of the same party? Are they all Republicans like you?
As in most Georgia cities, we really run nonpartisan, so we're not Republican or Democrat, but they're all conservatives, I can tell you that.
Well, that's wonderful. So you've been able to convince the councilman of the rightness and your vision, so to implement the ideas that turn Dalton around?
So, you know, the thing about it is it's the same whether it's, you know, on state level, federal level. If you get other people involved in the vision itself, helping create that vision, it's amazing how you can get a lot of disparate people to cooperate and agree, because most people want the same thing, I think, you know, for their state, their country, or whatever. They want it to be a better of tomorrow than what it is today.
Well, you're attracting more and more attention from, I don't want to say the average folks, but from the good citizens of Georgia. Your message is resonating. What's your vision for Georgia?
You know, number one, you know, my number one mission is I tell people, since I'm not a professional politician, this isn't a campaign to me. I'm on a mission. And I'm looking for people that want to join this mission with me, which is to restore for Georgians what I think our birthright is, which is to be the most successful, powerful economy in the South, which we were for many years, beginning really in the 1970s through the mid-1990s, we've lost our way. And there's no reason with the resources that we've been given by God for this state that we shouldn't once again be able to restore our birthright, which is to be that economy. Right now, unfortunately, we're sort of like Spain is in Europe or whatever, is becoming the sick man of Europe, or I think they call Italy that. We've sort of become the sick man of the South over the last 15 years or whatever, and there's absolutely no reason for that to happen.
Why haven't, what should have been done and why hasn't it been done to return Georgia to a vibrant economy?
We got lazy, number one, and people really misunderstood what Georgia's success really was beginning in the 1970s. It was really the miracle of Metro Atlanta that led that success. There were some other pockets around the state that was successful. Dalton would have been one of them because of the carpet industry. But most of the state really didn't come along with that. Where the state leadership, really regarded Atlanta, the Metro Atlanta's miracle as being their success. It was their great ideas. They didn't really realize what was happening. And then when Atlanta lost their way in the mid-1990s, it took Georgia with it. And, if you look at the miracle of Metro Atlanta, it wasn't led by politicians, it was led by business leaders. And, when you can almost track it to the day when Robert Woodruff died, and Robert Rosetta didn't say long after that, they asked him about Coca-Cola being an Atlanta company. He says, we're not an Atlanta company, we're an international company that happens to be based in Atlanta. Which, the mantle had passed, and he said, I'm really not the leader, the business leader in Atlanta anymore, that Robert Woodruff was. When all the Atlanta banks sold to North Carolina banks, you lost all that leadership. TBS sold, I can go on and on and on. When you lose business leadership in a community, it's you're going to lose a lot of your economic vitality, and that's exactly what happened to Atlanta. Now it's time for the state to step up and do the things that we need to do in order to turn the entire state around. Because what's happening, at least what I think is happening economically in Georgia, we're going to be stuck in this rut as long as we're having to divert a lot of Metro Atlanta tax money to other poor areas of Georgia, which means we're stunning our economic engine by not being able to reinvest their own tax money back into the infrastructure that we need in the Atlanta area in order to get it going again. Because if we can't get Atlanta area going again, we can't get Georgia going again.
Georgia has one of the strongest governorships in the nation. So if you were to become governor, what would be your top 3 or 4 or 5 goals day one?
First of all, I think Georgia has too powerful of a governorship, which is not good for a democracy. And what happens is you get lazy when you have the power just to make things happen, which means you don't have to come up with good visions or whatever, and also get other people bought into the plan. And the first thing that needs to happen in Georgia, one of the first things as far as that's concerned, is we need to restore the balance of power back between the legislature and the governor's office. Georgia is a very large, diverse state, and we need a lot of good ideas coming from a lot of different people. And most of them agreeing on whatever the vision is to make it happen. If you look at it from the national side, the same thing's happened there. And it really began to get completely out of kilter in Washington, D.C. after 9/11. And the Republicans have admitted, the Republicans in Georgia have admitted to me that were in Congress at that time, they gave George Bush far too much power. And now what we see what happened, because now Barack Obama has that same power. And our founding fathers are very, very smart people, smarter than I am, I can tell you that. And they understood the importance of the balance of power between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And it's completely out of kilter in Washington and in Atlanta, Georgia.
We have a problem with ethics in Georgia. Georgia is reputed to be among the bottom of the states in ethics reform, or lack of ethics reform. We have a major problem. What would you do to turn that around or to solve that?
Well, people need to understand how big that problem is.
Tell us about it.
To me, it's the biggest deficit we have in this country at the moment. It's not the trade deficit, it's not the budget deficit. It's the trust deficit that we have in our federal, state, local elected officials. And you can't have a first-class democratic republic if you don't trust the people that you've elected. And in Georgia, there's a couple of pretty easy fixes for that. Number one, they've already decided what was important for city councils, county commissions, and local school boards, which is they're under an Open Meetings Act. They exempted themselves from that. They need to be under the same open meetings like that. I'm talking about the legislature and the governor's office if he's involved in negotiating, our tax money. They need to be under the same open meetings laws that local government is under. The second side of that is you need, obviously, an ethic. If you're going to have campaign finance laws, you need a strong ethics commission. And that ethics commission does not need to be appointed by the three most powerful officials in Georgia, the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House, as it is now. Because, there are times, as we're finding out at this time, they're going to be investigating one of them, at times. And they need to have a separate funding source where they can't be tampered with as far as choking their money supply.
Well, it sounds like you've got some good ideas for improvement because Georgia does need ethics reform. There is a major issue, not only in Georgia but throughout the nation, on this thing called Common Core.
Well,
you have thoughts on that?
I didn't even know what Common Core was until probably a year ago. And as I told people, I was against Common Core before I even knew what Common Core was. Because I believe you can trace the decline in public education in this state and in this country, first with the centralization of all the power and authority into state legislatures and into the governor's office and down to Washington, D.C. In 1900, only 10% of 18-year-olds had a high school diploma in this country. In 1970, 80% had a high school diploma in this country. And that 70-year period when I was educated K through 12 was almost with total local control. As the controls started being consolidated into state legislators and into Washington, D.C., when Jimmy Carter was elected president, he started the Federal Department of Education. By 2000, only 74% of 18-year-olds had a high school diploma. Centralized power doesn't work. That's why the Soviet Union fell apart. We need to decentralize that control back to local communities, school teachers, school board members, and local communities need to re-involve themselves back in their public education system and make it what it's supposed to be, public education, not government education. Georgia will be the first state to do that if I'm elected governor, and we'll close this achievement gap much faster than anybody ever imagined, because I believe in the power of the best educated workforce in America, which are school teachers.
There's another issue called regionalism, where we have seen Georgia divided into 12 areas, basically run by appointed bureaucrats. So it eliminates the responsibility of elected representatives in that area at the very local level and levels at the state level. So, what are your thoughts on regionalism? Is that something that you would support, or would you fight against regionalism?
Dalton is part of a regional commission, which I haven't fought it because we can't fight it because it's a state law. But first of all, if you want to have regional commissions, and if certain counties or cities want to be involved in that, it should be voluntary. If they want to be involved and they want to pay the dues to it, which is you have to pay, a certain amount according to your population, fine. If that were true today with Dalton, we would not be part of our regional commission. Number one, we're not even in a region with, in a lot of cases, that we even relate to. Dalton, which is a Tennessee border, we're in a Tennessee border county. Tennessee has no state income tax. We have a state income tax, obviously. We're in the same region with Paulding County, which is an Atlanta metro county. They're not close to a state with no state income tax. We don't have the same issues Paulding County has. Why are we in the same region as they? I also oppose them because what's happening in those regions, particularly our region, maybe the other ones are the same way, they've created their own bureaucracy who they answer to no one. And the wasted millions upon millions of dollars of federal, state, and local tax money is startling.
How much do you think has been wasted?
Oh, I mean, if you count the federal grants, things like that in Georgia, I mean, it's into the billions of dollars after all these years. Just look at what they require us, the state government does, as a local city or county. We have to have these plans done. I think it's every 8 years or something like that. Well, I can tell you, we all use the same consultant. All the plans look almost exactly alike, and they sit on a shelf. And we spend thousands of dollars to have those done just to be able to comply with the state law, so we can get more grants. And some of the grants we probably shouldn't even have anyway.
Would you turn some of those grants away?
It's that, well, number one, we have to shrink government at every level. One of the things too, which is sort of a sideline mission that I'm on, and I hopefully Georgians will understand what this mission is about, which is, and I said something about it earlier, Americans, I feel like our number one birthright is to be the freest nation on earth. That's what our founding fathers, understood when they started this nation. And since 2000, this country has gone from the freest nation on earth to the 11th freest nation on earth. We've gone from the 2nd freest economy on earth to the 16th freest economy on earth. And once you drop below the 80th percentile in those rankings, you then are no longer considered a free economy, you're considered a mostly free economy, which America now, last year, dropped below the 80th percentile. And we may have the right to give up that birthright ourselves. We don't have the right to give up that birthright to our kids, or for our kids or our grandkids. And to me, any politician worth their salt, and none of them are talking about it, our number one mission should be whatever it takes to get us back to our birthright, which is the freest nation on earth. And if we'll do that, all these other so-called intractable problems we have, Social Security funding, Medicare funding, teacher salary fundings, they'll take care of themselves. I guarantee you that.
That leads us to the next question. Chief Justice John Roberts, in his recent ruling on the Affordable Health Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, made a statement in his 193-page writing that that freedom is actually enhanced by the creation of two governments, not just one, referring to federal government and state government. And he said Congress cannot use the state's administrative or legislative apparatus to dictate to the states their actions. So he even used the phrase state sovereignty. Where do you stand on that issue of state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment?
Well, two of my favorite people in American history were the original conservative Republican, I'm trying to think of the right term. I can't think of the right term right now, Michael. But the original James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. And they understood that the states were the ones supposed to have the power in this country, not the central government. And they also understood with these 13 states at that time, we were supposed to be laboratories and see which one does the things better than the other ones, compete with each other, other ones will copy the other ones. And, I don't think they ever conceived that we would willingly acquiesce our powers to the federal government for really at times for very little money.
Absolutely. The 13 colonies in Georgia occupies a special position as compared to the rest of the nation. Each of the 13 colonies who signed the Constitution occupied that position. That those people then did not create a federal government for them to be subservient to it. It created a federal government so it would be the glue that would hold them together while they still withheld their rights after listing the 18 enumerated powers of the federal government and the supremacy clause applying only to those 18. So would you push that envelope that so many folks have discarded and acquiesced to the federal government? Would you push hard to stand up for that concept of state sovereignty as presented under the Constitution and supported in the last Supreme Court ruling?
Well, first of all, whenever I make a commitment to do something, and my commitment is to do everything in my power in my life, whether it's as a mayor, a private citizen, governor, whatever the case may be, of returning this nation to our birthright, which is to be the freest nation on earth, we have no choice but to do that. Because you can't be the freest nation on earth with an overarching central government that we have now.
And another question. How is it that a federal government agency such as the EPA can dictate to a state how they should administer their laws and what their laws should be? How does the federal government, if there were a federal government agency of dog catching, what would it be its powers then of controlling the state?
Because we allow it, period. We're
simple
still a
as
democracy, we allow it.
So our current administration and our previous administrations have just allowed it in order to get federal government funds, which every funding that is accepted by Georgia just puts us a little deeper in debt as we borrow money from
And
the
who I blame
Chinese.
for this is not the Democrats. We know what they are.
Sure.
I blame the ones that run as limited government conservatives, and they're not. And in this country, when we've lost so much of our freedom over the last 13 years, the things that is stressing me more than anything else. From 2000 to 2006, Republicans had the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. From 2010 to this date, they've had the House of Representatives. In Georgia, we've totally controlled, Republicans have totally controlled Georgia government since 2004.
Well, it certainly appears that you're not part of the mainstream Republican way, and I know you're not. But let me ask you, how has that affected your campaign and your fundraising?
It's, the first thing is we thought, and this was naivety, that we would have to get to the people themselves, that the Republican Party would completely ostracize us. That's not happened. The very top leadership has ostracized us. But we have been pleasantly surprised as we've gone around Georgia speaking to Republican groups, Tea Party groups, things different, whatever. They're signing on to the campaign at the lower levels, particularly the Republican women. One thing I like about women, they're not going to be bullied by anybody. It's, some of the men, they'll say, well, I support you, whatever, but I got to be quiet about it. The women, they're not being quiet about it. So we've been pleasantly surprised on that side of it. It has affected our fundraising outside of Dalton. We're about to have another big fundraiser in Dalton. And Dalton can finance a lot of this primary campaign. Hopefully, as we continue to catch on, we'll be able to raise a little more money outside. The beauty of this campaign is this. This is not a general election. This is really a fairly small amount of people in Georgia who are going to vote in this primary, and we know who they are. We've got the data to know who they are, and we know where they are. So, we're putting together a campaign where we're going to get to those people probably better than using a television advertising, because television just blankets it out. Number one, you got 300 channels now, and you don't know who who you're getting to anyway. Well, we know who's going to vote in this primary for the most part, and we know where they live. So, and we've got a lot of volunteers, a lot of grassroots people that want to help us do that. And once again, it's not all across Georgia. Most of this vote's going to be north of 285.
We've asked a lot of questions during this interview, and it certainly isn't the amount of time to cover everything that you're wanting to do and will do should you become governor of Georgia. But perhaps you have a message that you would like to deliver directly to the people on something that we haven't discussed.
Yeah, I think, what I would like to ask Republicans, do you believe in limited government, less spending, less taxes, less regulations, and open and transparent government, or do you not? If you do, in this primary election between myself and Nathan Deal, John Barge is in it, but between myself and Nathan Deal, I think the decision is pretty clear if you believe in that, because Nathan Deal is 0 for 5. He has increased the size and scope of state government, mostly at the expense of local governments. He's increased spending dramatically, almost $3.5 billion in his 4 years in office, and I thought it was telling. In the first week of the legislative session, he introduced a budget with another $1 billion spending increase in it, while the governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, introduced a budget with a $1 billion tax decrease in it and said that's the people's money. So, I think it's pretty clear if you're a limited government conservative, and that's the term I was trying to think of with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. They were the first limited government conservative Republicans. And I want to give Georgia the chance to elect their first limited government conservative Republican, because we haven't had one yet. And I am firmly convinced if we do that and we restore freedoms back to the people, you will see this state once again regain our birthright of being the most powerful, successful economy in the South.
David, thank you very much for your time today. I'm sure the audience appreciates being able to hear from you unfiltered, without time constraints. And we thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Michael Owens signing off.